stay right there, because this is something that I read a month ago about some teachers were calling independent and homeschool educators to find out how to work with kids online that were having issues, academic and behavioral issues. And there has been a huge flight to independent online schools. Some parents have just said, you guys can't make up your minds. This virus is going to keep going. I'm taking my kid and making them totally online in an online school until this thing is over, even if it's 1 or 2 years. You bring up some excellent points, Tamika. As a parent, you don't want this uncertainty.
Yeah.
Sure.
Then, let's bring in the dynamic of the organizations that work with the schools, right? Right now, it's a nightmare. Being a organization that's contracted by school districts, the school districts don't know. They don't know. And
That's right.
one thing that they do know is that they are not going to have anyone on campus other than their staff.
That's right.
So outside programming has now gone virtual.
That's
So
right.
we're talking about, the learning level of the student, the learning that the teacher is going to have. Now anyone else that's going to be working with those youth have to now completely change their program into a virtual world, not knowing what that is, right? Not even knowing right now what the platform is that the schools are going to be using. So it's a time to work together to build solutions. I'm going to kind of come back to the fact that there are things that we can do. We're all freaking, our heads are spinning, really, and that's what we're hearing. But there are some common sense things that we can do to move forward to that new normal, right? And that was like the options of having teachers. What teacher lives in my neighborhood, right? Because they're getting paid from home. How can we open up little centers in our communities so that they can have the socialization part that goes along with it, right? Have a home with 10 students in there, and then they get to socialize together so that we get that. We just had at least 5 years of a dynamic change within our school system as far as different learning styles, right? Our school systems have tried to bring in virtual learning, sometimes virtual learning, they have all of these things set up for different levels of student as well as their learning styles, which has kind of gone to, it's not there anymore. We're going to have to rebuild that in this virtual world. But I think there are a lot of positives in what we are going through. Joyce, you named so many of them. Those are positive things that we're going to have to go through right now in this change. And everyone will say that during change is pain. Even if we want the change, it hurts.
Right.
We don't want this change. So we at sometimes make it more painful ourselves than it has to be, right? But what we need to do right now is, as adults, to make sure that we can reduce our stress is start looking at the solutions and trying to bring those solutions to the table. The school districts right now are doing a lot of surveys. That's good for our head because we know they don't know what they're doing, but at least now they're asking us for our opinions. And how do we foresee this next year happening? So, trying to manage our expectations, but still, what is our vision of what we think our child is going to be able to do? What am I going to be able to do in this year? In the Inland Empire where we are, we know that I think a lot of schools are looking at this hybrid model where they're half on, half off, and then again the all of those other services, the counselors, any of the community-based organizations are going to have to come to them through a virtual situation.
If they can make that transition, but not every nonprofit or community organization has the right model to transition to online.
No.
That's one of the things that LAUSD talked about in their platform. They said more students will need tutors to fill learning gaps online. So they want to make that part of their priority. And they said with distance learning, they know very well that all children learn differently. Tamika, to your point, So learning will be a challenge and stressful. So they have decided that lessons will be more robust and more intentional. And this is one of their priorities that they put on their platform. One of the big concerns they have is that kids will now be part of the large gathering in a mixed aged population, and that will spread the virus if they're on campus, because they'll either, the kids are carriers, so they'll either take it home or they'll bring it back to the classroom for the older teachers to be subject to maybe get infected. So LAUSD has gone through all these points that you talked about and more. There's just a whole list of them. And they talked about wellness counselors, that they've got to be part of the primary support for
So
the academic and social learning challenges. Go
to
ahead.
get to you, find someone in your area that's an educator that is going to let kids come to them and be, and spend their time there. That would be my answer to a lot of our parents out there. Find it low cost. But right now, when we're talking about the school budget, see if that's in the school budget. Have the schools pay their teachers to facilitate some of these things as a solution. So
Well, and that sounds kind of like, I know a colleague of mine, Dr. J, did a show on this as well, the pros and cons of going back to school, and she brought up a lot of questions as well. And I believe there's a YMCA that did a model maybe with pods of 8 or 9 people.
Yes,
And so
yes.
that took care of a lot of the issues, a lot of the scares or the concerns with the health issues and ways that it would be handled if someone did contract it. And it's the irony of all this just blows my mind, right? Because haven't they been begging us to have smaller class sizes?
Right. Well, high schools have done that. Yes, the high school in LA, oh God, named after one of the prior superintendents. And they were a model school 8, 9 years ago on pod learning. You stayed with your group for 4 years, and there was minimal changing of classes. As you know, the bell rings after 55, 60 minutes, you change your class. Well, most of the work was done in 1 or 2 or 3 rooms. They want to go back to that now. If for the hybrid model, you stay in your room, you 10 kids, the other 10 are in a tent outside, okay? And the teachers move, the kids stay. And this is part of their monitoring and tracing of the virus. Since the teachers move from class to class, then you can say, well, Miss Jane, the teacher, she teaches 3rd grade and she went into 3 classrooms only all day long. So we can trace it back to those 60 students or whatever the number is that she was in contact with. So that's part of that hybrid model. Students don't move their classes. Teachers move from room to room. That's part of the
That's kind of
solution.
something I thought early on, but I mean, sometimes teachers be territorial about their rooms, and I understand.
But it's not the same room. It's not the same room. Remember, you have retrofitted and modified your room for hygienic safety, a higher level of safety. And part of that physical distancing was bringing down the class number to 10 or 15. 15 is the max. And the rest of the students, if there are no other empty rooms, are in a tent, that's my word, tent, outside, or in a structure outside. Our governor has said, Dr. Fauci has said, go outside. This is an airborne virus, and it will be absorbed by the trees. It'll be absorbed by the earth. So go outside. Your air conditioner filters the same polluted air over and over again. So you're more prone to get it in the room than you are sitting outside on the patio. Look, again, virus is in the driver's seat. That needs to be the name of this podcast. Virus is in the driver's seat.
I think it is. I think that's what it's going to be.
Well,
Go ahead.
go ahead.
Before we turn it over to the virus complete, I do want to raise one final question. We've talked about a lot of different approaches, some really innovative ideas, and probably a solution or two if a few administrators in the school district happen to wander past. But when all is said and done, we're educating young people. Who's going to have, where's the biggest adjustment for the young people? Is it going to be academics or is it going to be social?
Wow, good question.
Everyone gets one shot at it. Academics are social.
They're,
It's going to be the biggest adjustment for them.
Is it? Go ahead, Shor.
It's going to be both, and they're going to impact each other. They're not. The time management thing is going to be the real kicker. The time management, but the time management, if you have multiple kids in a house, it's going to be harder. It could be harder depending on the technology within the house. So socially, it could be harder in some households rather than technologically to achieve their academic goals. But I think that mentally, it's going to be all of it that's going to be doing it. All of it's going to be giving its little share to the freak out, the mental, stress that the kids are going to have as they're figuring out that they're not going to see Molly this year, right? As they, there were people they thought they were going to see at the beginning of the year that they're still not going to see. There are things that have been happening over the summer and at the end of last year that are still going to be happening, like they're still going to be home. So they're mentally, socially going to be a mess, but then they're going to be looking at why do I have to sit at this computer all day? Even though that's what they wanted to do.
Right?
That's right.
They don't want to learn while they're sitting at the computer.
That's right. That's
but now
right.
they've got to monitor their time and sit at that computer, and that's going to be mentally stressful for them and for their parents. But it's only, to me, temporary, because once they learn that style of learning, they will be okay. I think this is a mound that we have to go over. This is a learning curve. But once we come off of that curve, we're going to be fine.
I absolutely agree. And I will just add this one word: overlap. That's what it's going to be. Emotion, stress, overlapping, their worn down confidence for learning. So it's both.
Tamika, you have the last opportunity to take a stand.
Worn down confidence for learning. I like that. And with that, even though the therapist is here and present, I will say I think their biggest adjustment is going to be academics. Schools ranging from highly rigorous to barely brain dead are going to be having kids who need to catch up. And so that adjustment is going to be academic. Now the impact is socio-emotional above all, because they're not only dealing with their own uncertainty, they're dealing with their parents, they're dealing with their friends. And I mean, like we said, a lot of the kids have been online anyway. They make friends on Fortnite or whatever else they play online, and a lot of their friends aren't even in the same school building anyway. So socially adjusting to just being online, our kids kind of got that down. But the academic and what I call specific or academic anxiety, that's going to kick up. That truancy, that's going to kick up. So those are the things we're going to see kids not checking in, because if I was already behind in math and you going to give me an hour and I can barely even ask a question, I'm not going to subject myself to this every day. And parents who don't have the emotional ability to support or the academic ability to support are going to say, you know what, baby, we not going through this. It's just the same thing we see when young men are getting pulled out of school constantly in trouble with the school, and the parent doesn't know how to work it out and doesn't have the skills to work it out. What do? They let them stay home because it's easier for you to stay home than for me to have to give phone calls at work. So again, twofold adjustments. Yes, academics is going to be a hard catch up. I think we need to loosen the reins and loosen what our expectations are for what we're learning and what has to be learned right now. I will very much love to make the case for a switch up of standards right now. What do we really need to be learning? What does giftedness right now look like? What is education, and what do our children really need to know for this new world? In which we may not even have change yet. My daughter's assignment was to count change.
Because what about college? We can't say lighten up the load now. My daughter, because we were pulled from her college and, they're not going back. She's not going to go back to New York. We're trying to get into a local college here. But when we're looking at, what the requirements are to be in college. You know, it's a it's a lot going on for her at this point.
Well, and on top of the emotional stuff, right? Because if there was no emotional stress, is my unemployment check going to come? If that was not going on, then yes, the rigor of what they're doing and the beautiful distance learning and all that would be great. But when you've got kids in homes where domestic violence has kicked up because there are parents who were stuck together who didn't like each other in the first place, trying to put this rigorous, brand new style of learning on top of that is just not, it's not ethical. If you ask me, it's not even ethical, it's inhumane. We need to take some time to take care of our children's bodies and minds. And by minds, I mean their spirit and their holistic development. And we need to go ahead and just, that's my opinion, we need to let that be important first and then add on the rest.
I think that is a fine place to stop. So again, Glenn W. Hunter, Trauma-Informed Preventive Services. Joyce Clark, Tamika Carter, thank you very much for the insight, the attitude, and most importantly, the understanding and compassion that comes with such a delicate topic. Shor Denny, wrap us up.
Wrap us up. Okay. I was just really going to throw out there that Common Core did this to us, what, 5-6 years ago?
Yeah.
They interrupted our learning and they instituted something that they weren't ready for. And I don't believe Common Core is here anymore, but I know that the trauma that it caused my child and trying to learn Common Core when the teachers weren't prepared, when no one was prepared, is still with her. She's still afraid of math because of the challenges of those 4 years with no one knowing how to develop her and them giving them, as Tamika is saying, requirements and responsibilities that they can't even uphold. So I think the whole point here is caution, caution, caution. Yes, we don't want our kids in school. We're in a horrible situation. We need them to be educated. And Tamika, yes, how can we say that they have the same standards today when they didn't even finish last year? And we're wondering how they're gonna, if we're ever gonna get to a school site this year. But then again, we talk about college requirements. They change too. What is it we're really, this is an opportunity to look at the whole educational system and see how we can change it to be something more beneficial for all of us. I think it's a sci-fi moment. Maybe we need to start looking at those sci-fi movies when they do the virtual teaching, you know, and the kids are all sitting there saying the same thing, or I don't know.
Like robots.
Maybe.
Twilight Zone. We are in the Twilight Zone.
And Shor, yes, Common Core is still here, only it's been very much modified, very, very much modified. But it's more elective in its model. Common Core, actually they added some creative things, and they added more cultural African American and Indian pieces to the Common Core. And it was in, they were doing the last review of it because I was one of the audience reviewers of Common Core to give some input last year. So they hadn't finished with the modifications of it. So I just don't know where it is, but it's modified quite a bit.
Their math, she's scarred. She is scarred of that. What is it? She's not there. Intermediate math or whatever. A girl. It was
that new math.
Yeah.
That do multiplication to figure out this addition problem.
Yeah, what? Oh yeah. So yeah, they come up with some really interesting concepts.
And Glenn, Shor was just made me think of something. Mm-hmm. Parents are going to have to go back to school, virtually back to school, to teach their children who are home with them every single day. Parents, you got to get a tutor. You must get a tutor. Yes. Another expense for the household.
On the expense of the school district. How about that?
Not going to happen. 10% cut this year by the governor all across the board.
It's going to be tough. But we will be here and we'll continue to explore. To reach out to us, tips, TIPS, IE.inlandempire, cal@gmail.com. Again, tips, Inland Empire, cal, C-A-L, @gmail.com. Like us, share us some more. There are solutions coming out of this group, and one way or another, our children will be educated. Let's hope it's with the right knowledge and with the right attitude. Be safe.